It is a great pleasure for me to be talking to Amelia Dalton, who is a woman who has accomplished many things and been a trailblazer in many fields, really. She was just telling me that she is one of the few people I'll ever meet who has driven from Kolkata down to the southern tip of India and back up to Gujarat.
Not all in one go.
Not all in one go, but even in bits, I think that's pretty impressive. And she was also one of the few women to get her commercial qualifications as a cruise. Well,
yes, I was.
Give me the correct terms, because
I think really for a small ship like that, I was a skipper.
And you can see, in fact, here we are. This is the boat Monaco.
The Monaco.
It's an ice trawler, a Danish ice trawler.
Yes.
Tell us the story.
Built a solid oak, 25 metres. And for those who are interested in technicalities, she drew 5 metres, which is an enormous depth, bigger than most cruise ships that you see going around the world these days. She drew 5 metres so she could have a lot of fish on board when she came back to Denmark.
But you weren't taking fish, were you?
No, we were not allowed to fish. She'd been decommissioned, and I bought her with a company which my friends and I had set up to give a couple a job. They were extremely good at what they did. They were out of a job, and we felt they needed support. We bought her. I persuaded the National Trust for Scotland to give me a contract to take their people out to St Kilda, west of the Hebrides, and I operated her for 10 years. And in the course of that, I managed to get my commercial qualifications. The Department of Transport said I needed 2 years accrued time on watch in my logbook. And I said, well,
captain.
Don't even have a logbook, so let's think how we're going to do this. And eventually I did some tests, and I had 5 hours with the chief examiner of masters and mates for the British Isles. And at the end of it, he gave me my ticket, much to my delight and astonishment.
And that story and that incredible journey was the subject of Amelia's first book, Mistress and Commander. But the book that we're talking about today is a book called Pages from My Passport, which is really the story of what came next, isn't it? And it involved this boat. Can you tell us about this boat?
Well, this boat, as you can see, somewhat different. The most beautiful, very small ship, taking 80 passengers. It was a collection of small ships built in Italy, funded by the government, built completely over spec, and she was one of them. Inevitably, the company building them went bust, and they're now spread around the world. They were Renaissance cruise ships, and the company I was employed by bought one to operate internationally. And I was given a blank sheet of paper to decide where the ship should go. The company already had one ship, Hebridean Princess, which some of you may know, working on the west coast of Scotland. And my job was to replicate the west coast of Scotland throughout the world. So the more curious, funny little areas, strange archipelagos, places that people found difficulty in getting to, that's what I was looking for.
I think your earring may be catching on your microphone, possibly. Perfect. Not to cut you off, but we want to hear what you've got to say.
Thank you.
So, an amazing boat, and getting to this boat, there was a bit of a journey to it. Can you tell us the background to how you came to be? Because you'd done 10 years with the Monaco, first captaining, but also running that and running those tours, and then you finished with that.
Well, I decided my life kind of fell apart for various reasons, and I thought, do I want to spend the rest of my life in the west coast of Scotland? Complicated weather, dodgy finances. There are other things to see in the world, and I managed to persuade various people to let me work as a tour guide. And the first place I was sent to was Prague. I'd never been to Prague before, so I had to do quite a lot of homework. And then Russia, some amazing times in Russia.
Now, you've glossed over Prague there, but I want to stop you because there are some rather extraordinary stories that happened in Prague, aren't there? Involving, well, 2 that come to mind, a bomb blast
The bomb was actually Russia.
That was Russia. I beg
Bomb
your
was
pardon.
Russia,
Well,
that's
we'll come
all
to
right.
the bomb blast. Prague, then. The lights. Turning off the
Well,
chandeliers.
I
Tell
was
us
very.
about this.
I was asked to do all the organisation for a man who was having his 60th birthday party, and he flew in 60 of his best friends from America, and took over the most glamorous places in Prague. One of which was Prague Castle, and we had the final party at Prague Castle, and everybody was dressed up in their tux, and somebody was going to sing "Happy Birthday." Enormous cake was wheeled in on a sort of trolley. And of course, in this, for those of you who have probably been to Prague Castle, beautiful white room with gold sconces. It was actually the film that was the room that was used for the filming of Amadeus. And I thought it'd be nice to have the big chandeliers out, not have those lit. So I went to Vladimir, my wonderful guide, and said, "Vladimir, can we turn out the lights?" And he looked a bit unhappy. Anyway, he disappeared, and lo and behold, the cake came in, creaking on its trolley with one leg, sort of going like this, and I thought, God, the cake's going to fall off. Anyway, the cake came in, and the lights went out, and everybody sang, and he blew out the candles, and it was magic. And I went out to say thank you to Vladimir, and in we came, and the lights went on, and out came the man whose birthday it was, and said, "Amelia, that was so lovely, and we're going to have some dancing. Do you think we can have those chandeliers off again?" So I went and found Vladimir, and I said, "Vlad, can we have them off?" And he looked, he said, "No, you can't." Now, Vladimir had never said no to any of my requests before. So I said, "What's the problem, Vlad?" And he said, "Well, to do that, we had to pretend there was a power cut in the whole of Prague. They turned out the lights on the city, and frankly, I can't ask them to do that again." So I said, "That's all right, Brad, don't worry."
And the bomb blast in Russia. So Russia, this was another trip.
Well, the bomb blast. I was on a ship, a small ship, and I had a group of 20 very, very smart people. And our first day, we were going to go by hydrofoil down the river from St. Petersburg to Peterhof, to the palace. And it was all lined up that we'd go on the boat. Went ashore, and there was the lovely guide, Irinia, and I was chatting to her about getting things sorted out. And she said, I said, "Where's the boat?" "Well, no boat, not going on the boat." I said, "Well, Irinia, we'd quite like to go on the boat. We don't really want to go in a bus." "No, have to go in the bus." So I said, "Well, what's the problem?" And she said, bomb in river." So I said, "Fine, we go on the bus." So we get to Peterhof, and we're walking along the front of the palace, and guess what? There was a most almighty boom. And if you've been to Peterhof, you'll know how much glass there is in the palace, and the Galleria, the nice restaurant along the front. All the glass came out of the windows, and there were my lovely group of Americans looking, as if they'd gone somewhere, so they had bits of glass absolutely sticking out of their hair, all over their clothes. Not one person was injured, thank goodness.
Incredible.
I'd have been in trouble otherwise.
Absolutely. But something that I hadn't appreciated before reading your book was how much work goes into the recce and the pre-planning. And because it sort of brought to mind for me sort of camera people on extreme sort of nature programs or something, because the presenter looks like they're being daring, but actually even more daring is the camera person who's doing everything while holding the camera. And you sort of were a bit like that with these tours, because you had to go first, check everything out, and without someone having prepared an itinerary, you were doing that to make the itinerary, and that led to some hairy moments.
Well, I was making the itinerary, so I was choosing where to go.
Yes.
And of course, unlike the television programs that you see, there was just me. I didn't have a lot of helpful people in the background. And my whole ethos for creating the program for the small ship was really to find places which I felt had something that was unusual, something that was really interesting about them, and then work out how the ship went there. 90% of ships, I have to say, do it the other way around. We're going to be there, we're going to go to Dubrovnik maybe. What do we do when we get there? Well, I think it's better to do it the other way around. So-and-so is really interesting. How do we achieve it? And of course, with the ship Hebridean Princess and other small ships, if you do beach landings you can go almost anywhere if you really want to. A
But
tool to explore.
When you were checking out some of these places, I mean, there were some extraordinary things. I was thinking you almost got stranded on an uninhabited island while looking for Viking marks, didn't you?
Yes, I did. Because it was a Scottish company, I thought that the links between Scotland and Norway would be interesting. And I found that the most westerly island of the Norwegian chain, Utvar, was supposedly where the Vikings stopped on their way to Scotland to sharpen their swords. And I thought, well, this is a useful link, and was this really true? I'm going to go and have a look. So off I went, working my way further west, ferries and bridges, and slowly getting further west. And I eventually arrived in the little town. And of course, the next morning I was due to get onto there was no ferry there, but there was a man, I was told, who'd take me out to Utvar. And I went down to the quay in the morning, and there was a man there with a boat. And I said, will you take me to Utvar? And he said, yeah, he does his round about the fjords. So he took me out and dropped me off at Utvar, which was lovely, very pretty. If you put Utvar into Google, you'll find it these days. And there I was. It's the most westerly. It has a lighthouse on it. The lighthouse keepers used to bring soil back with them and put the soil into the dips in the rock to make little gardens. And so I looked around and I found the marks on the rocks, which I suspect were actually made by glaciers, but the story of the Viking swords is more fun. And so that was, did my research, did my photographs, made my notes, and he was supposed to come back at 2 o'clock in the afternoon and pick me up. And at 2 o'clock, there was no boat. 4 o'clock, nothing. 6 o'clock, nothing. And by now, I'm beginning to get a little unhappy. Of course, no mobile phone coverage, because way outside the mobile phone range. I had a Mars bar and a bottle of water, half a little bottle of water. So I thought, well, I'll go and sit. So I sat with my back against the lighthouse, which was warm. All through the night, I sat there, beginning to think, well, I hadn't actually planned on ending my life on an island like this. And not one soul in the world, apart from that boatman, knew that I was there. So I thought, well, what do I do? There was no wood on the island. I couldn't make a fire. So I looked at the sea and talked to the birds. And after a while, night came, and then the dawn came up, and I'm beginning to feel quite miserable by that stage. And at about 10 o'clock in the morning, I suddenly heard pat, 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 pat. And there on the horizon, he was coming back. And I jumped on board, you can imagine, very quickly onto his boat. And he wasn't in the least bit apologetic. He just said, I've come to collect you. And I said, well, what went on? And he said, well, it's a good thing Olga, or whatever she was called, came down to the jetty. She goes on a Saturday to visit her daughter, who's lives on the next door field. And she asked me why there was a car with a Bergen number plate sitting on the quay. And I'd left my hire car, parked it on the quay. And if old Olga hadn't been so curious as to why there was not a local car on the quay, I think I would have just be bones on Utvar now, actually. But,
a relic.
It taught me a lesson.
Yeah, but in some places it was too many people, almost, wasn't it? When you were doing a recce around and went to Madagascar to check out,
yes,
you had a lot of people that you had.
Well, the Comoros Islands were the most difficult, where I couldn't get any contact before. The Comoros Islands are absolutely extraordinary in the Indian Ocean, very beautiful, volcanic. And I couldn't get any sort of traction from anybody there. And I'd written this program about how the ship was kind of come in to these wonderful tropical islands, and they were going to have a barbecue on the beach, and it was all going to be very beautiful. And it was about 2 months before the ship was due. The cruise was full. And so I thought, well, I better go. The only thing to do is to go. So after taking a very small aeroplane from Dar es Salaam, with a body sitting next to me in a shroud on a seat, which is another story. I got there, and when I arrived at the airport, there were about 6 people, 6 enormous men, all tugging at my sleeve, saying, "You're with me, you're with me." So I had to choose which one was the best agent. Josiane, who was great, and
Wow.
it turned out.
Yeah. Now, you mentioned Google, but of course this was really in the days before the internet was very much used. I mean, it was
Yes.
late 90s, early 2000s,
That's
wasn't
right.
it?
It was.
So, I mean, how would your research be different now? Because you run a travel company. Has the internet changed how you plan?
Enormously,
Yeah.
enormously. But the fundamentals of what I were doing, the rocks don't move. The rocks are still there. The depths of the bays and the seas and the charts and all of those things are still absolutely critical. The difference is, of course, that if you all want to find yourselves a nice hotel or somewhere to stay, then the information is there. But the sort of information I was looking for was not. In fact, a lot of what I did in the very early days was through pilot books, because pilot books for each country and each area peripherally had a lot of interesting information.
Yeah.
So that was the way I did a lot of my research. That and history, very simply. If it's an interesting place, there's probably a museum or something like that, or a history of locally making pottery, playing music, all of those things.
Now, it's obviously you were a woman in a man's world as a ship's captain. But I think in this book as well, it often seems that you are a bit of an outlier. You say at one point, I had never lived a pearls and twinset life.
Yes.
And you're conscious of being something of an outlier in often being a woman in charge in many places where that is unusual. How much of a challenge, was that an asset in some cases, or was it?
There were times, I have to say that in Scotland it was tough. The West Coast then in the 90s was a pretty chauvinistic place, and I had to earn my stripes in a big way. Once I'd earned my stripes and proved I wasn't just a rich girl with a toy, then people were incredibly supportive. I think when I travelled on my own, I just really took the view that people were not stupid, and one of the things that most of them recognized was that if I could make it work, it would bring people in to their company, to their country, and it would be good for them. And the really, really important thing was that I would tailor what I wanted to what they could provide and what they could manage. There was no point in overfacing, a village in Madagascar. What would you like to do? What could you provide? And then they said, well, we'd like to do some dancing and some singing. Lovely. We've got some very nice CDs. So I said, well, actually, no, we don't want CDs. What we'd like is, for you to sing and the children to dance. And so it's very much tailoring things to a combination of what I wanted to get and what they could provide.
Because that is something that comes across really strongly in your book. It's you have an extraordinary way of getting people on side and convincing people to do things that they might be a bit reluctant to do at first. I mean, I'm thinking, for example, of you managed to enlist the help of a tug on the Thames to pick up some people who needed to be dropped off at a boat, just passing by.
That was fortunate. The Thames is very complicated with the lightermen and what you can do and what you can't do. But I once actually succeeded. Those of you who've been to Panama know probably that the Smithsonian owns an island in the middle, which they've had since the 20s. And it has a very, very interesting wildlife on the island, and obviously long records of the wildlife. And I wanted to take people there when the ship was going through, or actually the day before. I wanted people to go on this island, and the answer was no, can't be done. Well, I thought, come along, this is ridiculous. Of course we can do this. We're happy to split up into groups to make it more manageable. And eventually I succeeded, and I was at an occasion with Lee Durrell, and of course this was a Durrell Conservation Trust expedition. And Lee was very charming, and she said, Amelia's a difficult person to say no to. And I thought, I rather like that.
It definitely comes across in the book. I mean, it's a really funny and entertaining book, and there are so many kind of gripping and interesting events in it, but what comes through is your humour, your good humour under pressure, but also your ability to get people to work
Well, if you
with
can make people laugh and enjoy themselves, it helps.
Yes, absolutely,
In my
absolutely. It comes across beautifully.
Thank you.
You have been in some very challenging situations. I mean, the research for the Hebridean Islands cruises, it was going on during when 9/11 happened.
Yes.
And how did that affect
Well,
your work?
the ship was officially launched by Princess Anne in July 2001. And of course, 9/11 was September. And as we all know, that changed the traveling world enormously. The managing director said to me, well, what do we do? Do we do our winter program, go through Suez and into the Red Sea? And I said, yeah, we keep going, because if somebody wants to find us, they can find us wherever we are. And we did. We went through Suez. There were only 2 ships that went through Suez of a passenger nature. One was Minerva, and the other one was us. And yeah, on we went, keeping our heads down, just doing what we had planned to do, quietly going about our business, I think is the...
Now, I'm conscious that some people may be a bit reluctant about cruises. Cruises can be a bit of a Marmite topic. Some people love the idea and others are a bit sceptical about it. What can you say to those who might think that they're not the sort of people who would do cruises to make them think again?
I suppose, like most things in life, do your research, because there are enormous ships that you never need to get off, which absolutely give me the horrors, but that's different. And then you've got very small ships that only take half a dozen people. And the difference is chalk and cheese. And of course, if you look at the continuous adverts in the papers, you would think they were all wonderful. Well, I hate to tell you, but they're not. But if you do your research, in amongst that, there are some wonderful things. And
so what are you looking for? What
I think you're looking for, and I feel sure that for most people here today, you're looking for a ship that is used as a tool to explore. It's all about where you're going. Okay, you can go on a liner across the Atlantic where everything is on board and you're staying on the ship. But a small ship is a tool to explore, to take you to places that are difficult to get to any other way. And that is very much what I came into in Scotland and what I was doing, using the ship as an exploration tool.
And what also comes across really clearly in your book is there's a fine art to balancing planning and being flexible, being able to respond to unforeseen challenges, and having to redraw plans on your...
So long as it's not too dire, it's good fun.
Yeah,
yes.
I mean, I wonder how you juggle that. What is more important, or do you have to be able to do them both well?
Well, the sea can come and give you a nasty sort of fright when you don't want it to. So coming up with something that is flexible is important. I mean, this will probably horrify people, but on one occasion in Madagascar, we were going to a very small island, and I had been there, and the night before I was talking about the island, how beautiful it was, in a marine park. There'd only be us, and in the morning, the ship came up towards the island, and there was a little pall of smoke over the island. And I said to the crew, look, just take me across. I need to go and see what's happening. And I arrived on this tiny, tiny speck that we were going to use for snorkeling to find there was a nice party of fishermen having their breakfast. And their breakfast consisted of eating turtle in a marine park. Now, of course, if you take one turtle every 6 months, it's not going to be the end of the world. And it was their tradition and their life. But this was a wildlife expedition. And so to come ashore and to find people eating a turtle was not really very good. So I had to persuade them that, could you please just pack up your breakfast and actually go? Because I've told everybody there's nobody on this island. Anyway, away they went, very happily. I said, but do come back. It's not a problem. You can come back as soon as we've gone. But it'd be nice if you don't eat another turtle. So we had a long discussion about turtles. All of this in very, very broken French. And it worked out fine. Yes, one has to persuade people
Yeah,
quietly.
and some of the most challenging people you encounter are the people that you're bringing on the tours. Some of the quite demanding, paying guests. I wonder what your dream guest is. What makes for a good traveller?
Oh, very simple. Somebody with a curious mind. Curious mind. I always used to say you need three things: curiosity, patience, and a sense of humour, and then it'll do fine.
Yeah.
Curiosity is very, very important.
So, in the spirit of curiosity, what would you say is the most underrated sort of river or sea destination? If you were, directing someone to something that is not much discussed or we don't hear much about, but it's really worth seeing.
You do hear a lot about the Indian Ocean, but the Indian Ocean, to my way of thinking, is one of the most fascinating places in the world. The history, the exploration, the Chinese, the Portuguese, the Omanis, all of those people trading in the Indian Ocean have left their marks on the islands, the tiny islands. Then you have the wildlife of Aldabra, the Seychelles, is fascinating and very unusual, lots of endemics, and it's also very colourful and full of lovely, charming, entertaining, interesting people as well, who are, Madagascar is one of the world's most fascinating places. And of course, it's always nice, because it was a French colony, food's great, good wine from South Africa, fascinating wildlife, and probably you can muddle along a little bit in French, which is quite nice to be able to talk to people a bit as well.
Now, obviously, travelling by boat is a much more eco-friendly way of travelling than flying. But I wondered, are there ways, given that many of us are concerned about conservation and eco-concerns these days, any ways that we can travel better in terms of trying to be more responsible in the way we treat the places we visit, the people that we meet?
See, I would return to a boat or a ship, because one of the things that a ship does not need, if you're in a small ship, you're landing, as I say, by Zodiac onto beaches. There's no need to build lots of roads. There's no need to have a whacking great hotel producing all of the effluent from the washing, bringing in lots of food. That unit goes around and it can visit places without. And you can, as they say, leave no footprint. You really can. So I think, again, it has a lot to be said for it, as well as being huge fun.
Yeah. You mentioned you're heading to Oman shortly.
Yes.
This is a trip that you're running with your
yes,
company?
I'm taking a small group to Oman. I'm fortunate in that I've been to Oman several times, not just around Muscat, but up in the mountains and down to Salalah. My brother he did what David Attenborough refers to as the world's first totally successful reintroduction program, which was reintroducing the Arabian oryx into the edges of the empty quarter for the Sultan. And I used to go and stay in the empty quarter in the 80s, all kitted out in my robes. I love Oman. It's got charming people, interesting wildlife, fantastic scenery, and great food. What more with drink can be a bit of a problem, but
Well, can't have everything, I suppose. You talk in the book about your experience of the benefits of being English, as you call it, when you were researching. I wonder if that's changed in the last... Are the English as welcome as they were when you were doing recce's?
Being English worked, and it was very popular with my American tours. But when I was doing the travelling and the recce's and building the itineraries on my own, I actually discovered it was better to be Scottish. All over the world, the Scots are loved. There isn't that colonial edge to things if you're Scottish. And it was a Scottish company, so I'm afraid I pretended to be Scottish.
Well, did you do an accent? Did you?
Well, having worked in Scotland for 10 years, I could come up with a Scottish accent from time to time. But no, I did discover that actually it was a great mistake to try and speak whatever the language of the country was that I was in. It was obviously hello, thank you, goodbye. But if I started to speak more than that, especially in French or Italian, then of course whoever you're speaking to thinks you understand, and off they go, rambling off, and you're left, as you might say, at sea, unable to understand, and you've missed that vital thing that actually, there's a landing fee of 300 euros a head or something, So
Yeah.
you have to be careful.
Yeah, know your limits, I suppose.
Absolutely.
Yeah. There's a lovely, in that early Prague trip that you talk about in Pages from My Passport, there's a funny moment concerning fleshless food. As far as vegetarians were concerned at the time, the menu said fleshless food. I wondered about cultural differences and how much cultural difference people tend to be looking for when they're doing these trips, and how difficult that can be to juggle.
I think cultural differences are really one of the major reasons one travels. I did have a very sophisticated American who came along and said, well, this hotel is not good enough. It was the first night of the tour, and he said, this is not good enough. We've come from much grander hotels. And I took a deep breath, and I just said, well, surely, as a traveller, and I knew he was a member of their frequent travelling club. As a traveller, you're travelling to experience different things. That's the whole essence of travelling. And, if you don't find things interesting in 4 or 5 days' time, I'll do something about it. But you give it a go. Give it a go.
Yeah. Has food become more challenging or less challenging as the years? Because veganism has become very popular. Is that easier to accommodate than it was, or has that?
Well, I have to say, on the Monaco, on one occasion, which was in the 80s, we had a group of vegan Buddhist monks, which in Scotland in the 80s was quite something. And so they said they'd bring all their own food. And then at the end, they said they'd charge me for their food. And I was furious, because actually we'd done the whole thing and we'd never even touched their food. So I think it's become fashionable in some ways. I think just choosing whether you wish to eat meat or vegetables or be vegan, it's entirely your own choice. But again, I think you have to be flexible, because there are occasions when it can be quite difficult if you're in the middle of nowhere and people are not, you can always get by with a cup of tea and a banana anyway.
Well, you were saying your drive from Kolkata down to southern India,
yes.
The tip, you lived on...
I did. I lived on omelettes, because of course an omelette is cooked in front of you. Banana comes wrapped up, and a cup of tea rarely goes wrong, because the water should be boiled.
You did mention that you lost a stone.
Yeah, I know. Well, that was just because it was hard work. Absolutely. But, if you are somewhere where things are a little bit dicey, then you just have to be sensible.
You are, as well as being mentally quite tough, I think, even physically quite tough in terms of... there are a number of quite harrowing physical, a nasty gash dripping with blood at one point.
Oh yes, that's very exciting.
You've got
Everybody wants to see it. I've got. Yes, that was exciting. The scorpion was the worst thing, I have to say. The scorpion, I thought that was my second. I've lost quite a few lives. One, I think, was on the uninhabited island. Another was the scorpion. And then a couple of earthquakes, which I
think you can have to elaborate on the scorpion. I don't think you could leave the scorpion.
Well, the scorpion was in Madagascar. I would gone, and actually, fortunately, because it was Madagascar, I'd taken my son, because I thought it would be interesting for him. He was an artist, and he drew beautifully. We'd worked our way, again, right out to the very edge to go and look at an island that I wanted to see. We were staying, we'd taken our water and our sleeping bags and to stay in a hut on the beach. And some people down the beach had kindly given us supper, came back, and we'd taken, obviously, mosquito nets with us. And we'd strung up the mosquito nets in the hut and spread out our sleeping bag and everything before it got dark. And down we went, and we had supper with them, and we walked back up the beach. It was absolutely glorious. Not a light, just that enormous dome of the sky covered in stars. and we walked up to the hut, and of course no electricity or water or anything, and there was a candle, and my son was sort of fidgeting with his mosquito net. And I said in a typical maternal way, what are you doing? And he said, I'm just checking my bed for scorpions, Mummy. I parted my mosquito net, climbed into my bed, and I put my hand right on top of a scorpion, which had come out from under the pillow. I've still got a mark, actually, let me see. And I don't know whether anybody else, I'm sure somebody's been bitten by a scorpion, stung. It was unbelievably painful. I could feel within 2 or 3 seconds like a red-hot needle up my arm, up into my ear, right the way down my side. I could feel my heart going ba-doink, da-doink, doink, boink. You know, just all was wrong. And there was my son saying, don't panic, Mummy, don't panic, Mummy. Anyway, so I sat on my bed and feeling quite ropey. And Hugo, I said, take my mobile phone. And up he went, and he climbed around in the jungle up above the hut and eventually got a signal and rang up my brother, who had spent a lot of time in Madagascar. And he was out, so he had to come call again a bit later. And then eventually, after 3 phone calls, the answer came back, there are no fatal scorpions in Madagascar. I had decided by then that if I was going to die, I would have died. But for about 36 hours, it was unbelievably painful. Oh. I put a pillow under there, and I just propped up my hand, and a breeze of air over it. Oh. It was not fun, not good fun.
Wow. It comes at a toll. It takes a toll on some of these travels.
But Hugo did all the work for me. He went and found the island and looked at it, and it was all good.
Wow. Well, we're going to open up to audience questions. Does anyone have any questions for Amelia? We have a roving mic if anyone would like to ask any questions. Anyone? No?
Nobody.
No questions. Oh, there's a hand here.
Oh, good.
Thank you. Always good to have the first question.
Thank you, Amelia, for that wonderfully interesting talk. Where is your absolutely favourite place in the world?
It's such a difficult question to answer because, okay, so there are various things that make. I have to say, I love Oman. It's got to be somewhere that has a combination of wildlife and people, all of these things. Madagascar goes a long way up the list. Madagascar, I like places, where frankly I might be bitten by a scorpion at the end of the day. It adds a bit of excitement. So Madagascar comes very high. Oman, I actually love the Baltic coast inside the Baltic Sea. The islands of Finland and Sweden are just beautiful, calm, really lovely. Beautiful places.
Not many scorpions there, I think.
Not many scorpions there. Although I did actually discover that scorpions, where there's one scorpion, there's 2. They like to go around in pairs. Scorpions like soft bedding, which is why it was in my bed. Mm-hmm. And one of the things they actually like to do is tuck themselves down inside a sofa. So if you go and stay with your friends in the south of France, give the sofa cushions a bit of a shake before you sit down.
Good advice. Anyone else have a question? Oh, a couple of hands here.
Extraordinary enough, I'm going with my son to Madagascar.
Lucky you.
In September, so it's quite useful. We hadn't actually thought of scorpions. Is there any sort of antidote you can take before?
No, I don't think there is. No, I mean, I suppose I don't really know about EpiPens, but I think maybe these EpiPens. But actually, it was stupid of me. It's my fault. It's quite simple. Animals don't really come and get you out of. It's because you have got too close. You've given them a fright, whatever it may be. And I should have, as my son was doing, I should have checked out my bed, and then the scorpion would have had a chance to scuttle away.
Yes, when I went to Borneo last year, we got bitten by leeches, my son and I. Ooh. And it was quite easy. The guide just came along and scratched the finger where it happened and went up a tree and got some leaves and then took the leeches sting away, and we were perfectly all right. Have you ever been to Borneo?
I have, yes. Yes, I did a Daryl conservation expedition because, the Sumatran orangutan and the Borneo orangutan are quite different. And they have orangutans in Jersey Zoo. So we were looking at both sorts of orangutan. And actually, we were going in Kalimantan along the south, right the way along the south coast, going in and up, finding little creeks, all by zodiac, which was good.
There was a question here.
Yes, there was a lady there.
Just behind.
Yes, thank you so much. Such an interesting talk.
Thank you.
Now, Mauritius, Madagascar, around that way can be quite prone to cyclones. So I was wondering, with the navigational aids available now, whether you sort of try and get out of their way, or if you're on your ship, do you sort of sit it out, as it were?
No. I suppose I've been in one really big bad cyclone, and we avoided another one by changing the itinerary.
That's in a few minutes' time.
Oh, Taiwan
Something
is
for everyone.
very
There
interesting.
we go.
I mean, the cyclone that we got mixed up in Madagascar was really interesting. In that the yes, well, we were all out snorkeling and having a lovely time, and suddenly my VHF went, and the captain said, "I want you back on board now, Amelia." So we scooped everybody up, and we got back on the ship, and we were on the north. West side of Madagascar. And for those of you who know Madagascar, there's round in Diego Suarez on the east side is the most fantastic harbour. And so we had to get round the top of Madagascar. And we all knew, and the captain gave out the message that when, within 3 hours, we would be in completely calm water. So we went scooting around the top. The only way that we could have dinner, actually, was to sit on the floor of the dining room, which, of course, is in the lowest part of the ship. So we all sat on the floor, and we ate our dinner, and the crew came and joined us. They were all out in the galley originally. Sort of, you could hear the plates going crashing around. And I went into the galley and said, "Look, for goodness sake, please don't worry about all this. Why don't you come and join us? Then you can have something to eat, too." So we all sat on the floor and ate our creme brulee or whatever it was. And then the next day, we were off Mauritius, going to Round Island at the very northern end of Mauritius to look at the, you can't get onto it, but you can see the vegetation because they've taken off all the rats and the cats. And the vegetation now is returning, and we were going round to look at it. It got really quite lumpy out there, but we managed to get into the zodiacs, which is quite tricky when you've got the big ship going slowly and the little ship, then the little boat will go underneath. So you have to be very cautious. But we were in the zodiacs, and so the only way to get back onto the ship was for the ship to go along quite slowly, and we all went in the wake where it was smooth. And after about 12 miles, we got back on board. But so you've got to be flexible. But the important thing is never, to look after everybody. And clearly some people are more frightened than others. But if somebody like me looks frightened and is not confident, honestly, about what's going on, and doesn't make a decision, that's not good. You have to have somebody who's prepared to make the decision and to say, actually, we're going now. I know you're enjoying yourselves, and I hate to stop what you're doing, but actually we need to go now.
And I'm afraid that's what I've got to say just now, because we have unfortunately come to the end of a lovely session. If you haven't read Amelia's book, there is several piles of copies over there, and she will be there to sign them. I heartily recommend it. It is a really enjoyable, funny, and engrossing read. And what better way to buy it than with the signature from Amelia in it. So,
thank you very much.
But for now, please join me in thanking Amelia
Thank you very
Dalton.
much indeed. Thank you.